Hi, everyone. Welcome back. This is the Growth Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, David March. And every week we have new guests coming on the show talking about growth, talking about innovative ideas and how to grow our businesses. Today we have a special guest, Robert Lovegrove. He is a growth architect, president and CEO of the ChemQuest Group. Robert, if you want to introduce yourself, go on ahead.
Well, pleasure to meet everyone. And David, yeah, as you said, currently just took on a new role as president and CEO of the ChemQuest Group, a boutique management consultancy and M&A advisory working across the specialty chemicals industry. Before that, I spent 13 years in a major corporation, the last 10 years of it as a direct report to the CEO, really driving growth of that multi-billion dollar conglomerate across multiple business units and a completely global footprint. So glad to be here. Glad to talk about how you grow businesses because there is a science to it.
Yeah, everyone's trying to figure out. Everyone's like, can I just go on a Claude or ChatGPT, just like how I can grow a business? Should put me in the right direction, right? That's
Yeah, Claude's got it. Yeah. Now, if you really look at it, there's truly is a science behind really doing a great diagnostic on a business and trying to figure out, where do you put your time and energy? Where do you put your capital? How do you invest in that? And especially when you're sitting in a very large industrial conglomerate, it's really important to look at how do you direct capital? How do you truly understand it? And then how do you have the systems in place to really drive organic growth or inorganic growth? From the organic side, it's really good gated systems, a good amount of what's coming from innovation. What does your customers want there? What's your organic growth pipeline look like in the way of new products and services? You complement that with the strategic placement of your business to maximize share and earnings growth, and then really lay in, pricing and pricing power, which gives you your most immediate impact on earnings. So there's a little bit of a science. There's multiple facets going on, but you really have to understand at a micro segment level what's going on in your business and then win the micro segments.
yeah. I mean, yeah, it really, you have to get into the nitty gritty details. Have to start targeting everything. Have to start labeling everything, tagging everything. I think that a lot of the problems really start off with not having the right infrastructure and the right systems in place to even capture that data in the first place. I think that that's kind of a key piece as
No,
well.
I'd agree with you 100%. I think back to 13 years ago, joining a corporation and looking at it and saying, there are systems in place, but there's multiple different systems in place. And we really couldn't get a viewpoint at the C office level of what all is going on that around growth and really the new product pipeline and how does it look. If you asked people, it was almost like the pet projects that got profiled instead of the meaningful, tangible impact. So it's important to get the right systems in and get homogeneous systems in place and common processes that you can look at multiple facets of a business and saying, hey, what are the right things to put my time and energy into? And the most important part here, when I say put your time and energy in, it's the lost opportunity cost. It's the lost opportunity cost of believing something's going to be there and keeping it going and going and going. And I can look at it in my career, probably about 20ish years ago, being really enamored by an innovation and all the things it could do to realize that once we got to the second fail fast test, it really flopped. But it was spending way too much time and not really pushing that second fail fast test to really figure out, are we there? It was more of enamored and again, the what if. And if you look at it and go, wow, lost a year's of time on those resources that could have done something else. Again, so like you said, systems, processes, mindset, to really drive
Yeah,
growth. And I'm
I
talking
I
about
really
innovation growth, right?
I really connect with you on that specifically. I mean, in regards to being like enamored with the innovation, I think that there's so many things that I get involved with too, like that. I'll build out some kind of app, or or even, you know, I wrote a book 2013, and I was like very, very passionate about the book. I thought that everyone was going to read it, and thought it was like such a new thing. And I didn't do the fail fast, fail often thing. I put all my time and energy into like making the best book or the best product, really the best product, best service. What I mean, it's applicable to a lot of different things. And when you do that and you don't really get the audience involved and you don't really track what's going on and you don't put your actions out there, it doesn't really go anywhere. It doesn't go too far, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And a lot of times is we always joke a lot in science-driven companies, like my former employer or in the current ChemQuest group, is we work on a lot of unique science in our labs as well. And you got to look at it and say, it's not the science itself; it's the need for the science. And do you really understand what the marketplace wants? There's many, many stories of developing. I'll use a car analogy: the Mercedes Benz when you only really needed a Chevrolet. And
Yeah,
or the or if I
yeah,
stay in General Motors, you develop the Cadillac solution for the Chevrolet problem, and then you try and figure out why is nobody buying it, and it's because it's over-engineered and overpriced. And yeah, it might be the best science and might be the most robust product, but again, like you said, you put all your time, energy into making something absolutely great. That good was good enough to get a revenue stream, and great will come after good. And you just gotta kind of get into that mindset again. And the great thing is when you're doing a new product development, all that sort of stuff. For me, I've spent 20 plus years in advanced materials industries. And when you're putting material inside a component or a material in your laundry detergent, a material in a plastic, a material on an aircraft, you've got to kind of look at it and say, the person you're selling the material to, what's the first test they're going to take? So most people are familiar with the GE organization. There's one thing you learn if you study GE and the GE systems of doing innovation, and that is the frozen turkey test. So this is something that from my past, fortunate in my past to be involved in working on some of the very first composites ever used on a Boeing aircraft or in an aircraft in general. And as we were developing the technology, we did a lot of nice things like using the Ferrari Formula One car for testing and getting the G forces right. That all sounds great. But before we even did that, we had to do the first fail fast test. And that is if you want to be a plastic on an aircraft or a material system on an aircraft, first thing you should do is mock up a panel, put it in the wind tunnel, go buy a frozen turkey. If it shatters and cracks, you got a problem. So we always call it the frozen turkey test. So everything we did was what's the frozen turkey test of, if you put a colorant chemistry into a certain formulated product solution, you know, and because of the pH nature of your chemistry versus that chemistry, what's going to happen? So you got to like mix some things up initially and do that frozen turkey test or whatever you're doing in innovation is always trying to figure out the customer's first test. What's it going to be? Your customer or the customer's first test and prove that through. If it doesn't, go back to the drawing board and build enough conviction because you can only knock on doors so many times.
no, no, it's
A
true.
good way to look at it is everybody dreams of getting into Walmart. So what's the Walmart buyer do? They turn away virtually everyone. So you got to build your value proposition, provoke people. People aren't going to connect the dots. And in our
Yeah,
scenario, working on composites and plastics, how many aerospace frame companies are out there? And it's Boeing, Airbus, and all the biz jets. So you really had to build the value proposition before you even provoked for us, the fun part of doing this innovation was really coming to a major aircraft manufacturer with a value proposition and enough testing that you would say, "Look, take a look at this."
wow, yeah, no, 100%. It's pretty enjoyable. When you think about the kind of trajectory one needs to have, or the growth, I should say, one needs to have to really get these kind of things into market. Do you find that like you're heavy on any particular, let's say, lead source? Do you think about like Facebook ads, or do you like what do you typically think about?
Okay, so in the industries I'm in, Facebook ads aren't going to help us in any way.
Yeah,
Okay, so we're making chemistry that goes into something. We're making ingredients that go into products that you touch 50 plus times a day. And, you know, the sources really come from a technical understanding of the markets and needs in the market and then a direct interaction with customer base. But I'll answer your question a different way. When you really look at running a larger corporation, and you do the growth diagnostic of it, you then turn around and say, analysts or shareholders are expecting me to grow at this pace. Where's the growth going to come from? Okay. M&A is the quickest answer for getting a bump in growth. Okay. But it's the costliest. But when you actually get down and say, okay, let me try and break down and say, okay, maybe I want to be growing at 5 to 6% per year. It seems about good in a mature environment. And you break that down and say, well, I can probably get 1 or 2% spread on pricing, and I can probably get some growth from that. And the markets themselves will maybe give me a couple of points. And then you really start looking at going new products and new product. What's my pipeline need to deliver each year? So working in larger corporations, you kind of break that down as saying, I need to be delivering this amount of growth each year from new products. Let's pack it into a stage gate system and figure out what needs to be coming out the end, what needs to be going through the middle, and what needs to be going into the front of the stage gate system each year. And then you probability adjust it. And then you can really start looking at what do I need to be looking at in the way of powerful innovation. And that's the way we drive companies that I've been associated to drive. And in my business today, we're advising hundreds of companies in this way of, exactly what do you need in the way of organic growth and systems and processes, and then breaking it down and saying, if you're designed to grow at this rate, again, what needs to go in the front end, through the middle, and then back to the end, and how long does it take, and what's the cycle of time, and what's the total growth you're going to get out of it, probability adjust it. And then you really come down and say, am I looking at the right things? When I look at it from a materials perspective, there's really a good 4-part chart that you can look at and say, what's the innovations with current products with current customers? Where can I take current products and find new customers? Where for current customers do I need to develop new products? And the next is the diversification of the new and getting a nice balance in that. And what's actually interesting when you take all of your marketing and technology budgets and you take all the money you're spending on innovation and you start looking at it through these lens, it's usually about half your money goes to your current product with your current customers and just keeping the refresh and keeping up with the churn of the business. If you start not paying attention to that, you can really get a fast decay in the business. The easiest next thing to do is take products that you already have and certified and try and do market translations, find new markets for them, new customers for that. So you're going to try and balance that all out. And then the interesting thing when you're trying to truly be a growth company and have the analysts in New York or analysts really recognize you as a growth company, you kind of have to draw a line in how much money and energy are you putting towards true innovation, which is new products, new customers, new markets, and really growing out from the core of the business. So there's a balance in that. And I'll be honest with you, we've played with this many, many times, and it tends to come down to about 20% of your money needs to go in the new space. And when you
Wow.
do that, and I'm talking larger budgets here and larger corporations, when you do that, then it's the discipline of well, 20% may sound like a lot, but then sometimes it doesn't sound like a lot. So it really comes down to what are the targeted bets that I'm going to place on innovation, which tie it all the way back to in the early stages of your stage gate system or your early gates. You've really got to get conviction. Am I working on the right things? Because in this, you could take 10% of your budget, work on something too long, and really put yourself behind the 8 ball of trying to really grow the corporation because you got lost opportunity cost by being enamored with something that you eventually figured out wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
And there's a tremendous amount of failure in organic innovation and company
Yeah.
led R&D out innovation. Again, when I say company R&D led out, it's got a tremendous amount of customer input into it, but it's more of the fact of I'm developing a product and then I'm launching to go scale my business and grow business and find business.
Yeah.
That's what I mean by technology out.
Yeah. That's a great point. A couple things I want to say to that. I love the idea you had there about the balance between like entropy of the business because everything is kind of leading towards entropy, right? I mean, like your roof is slowly degrading. Everything in life is kind of just like slowly
Yeah.
degrading. So it's like this whole idea of entropy and how to save it and how to still go 50-50 with like getting new business and growing new ideas, but also keeping that other piece. And so that was the first idea that I have. The second one was was the idea of like how long are these plans, these phases? These I feel like this could be really difficult to plan
It
out.
you know, if you're doing a simple project, I got my current product, I've got all my regulatory approvals for it, certification to sell, chemistry, etc. I've got my current product. You're finding a new application, a new market for it. Those are the short-term things, and you can usually land them in 6 to 12 months. But when you start looking at building new products, a lot of times you're in an 18-month to 36-month journey. So this
That's
is
a
where I
journey.
look at it and go, you hate to learn at the 33rd month that ooh, we missed something and this is a failure. We're going to have to shut it down. And the key thing here is it's kind of fun when you look at, you got to have gates and milestones to review things. And as much as you celebrate the successes, you have to celebrate the success to shut something down. So a good friend of mine would refer to this as the Irish wake. Go have a good, everybody goes to the bar after the funeral and just kind of celebrate the fact that you had courageous leadership to say, this isn't going to work. And honestly, when you look at in companies, there's a lot of internal politics going on a lot of times that people don't necessarily want to say, hey, this isn't going to work because of fear for, well, what am I going to get to work on next? So the taking
Mm,
the, I'll call it the courageous leadership to really call, hey, this one's not going to make it anymore. Let's kill it and let's move on to the next. That really needs to be celebrated and rewarded. If you don't do it, this is where you get into stalls because, and again, people knew it's not working. It's not going to work. You're over engineering it, but you just got to keep going because you want to prove what? Okay. And
yeah.
eventually it's going to come up to you and catch you.
Yeah, and that's reminding me a lot of movies now. How many movies are like that? They're just like how many movies are like showing someone in this in this journey, really enamored, really passionate about whatever they're working on, and it's like you just can't break away. Like that's difficult. That's to kind of like you know, go because it's almost like going behind a shed and shooting a dog. It's like, "I don't wanna do this. Nobody wants to do this."
Yeah, exactly. It's like the dog's going to die. Are we going to, how much longer are we going to prolong? Yeah.
Yeah, no yeah. That's I agree with you. It really takes some leadership to really to say that. Do you think that just comes from experience? Like, how does one gain that? That sounds difficult.
It comes from culture and mindset that you lay into your processes.
Mhm.
So it's a cautious nature of, okay, innovation, organic growth. The best way to do it is doing the gated system. Bodies of work, do a review and adjust, get funding to go to the next level, review and adjust, make sure and you're starting to converge with it. Could be this into this, you're getting boxed right into what is the actual product you're going to bring into market. So you have to look at it and say, the people that are going into the room to be the reviewers, you got to train that mindset.
Mm.
You got to train the curiosity. It's not that you're a rubber stamp or it's not that you're quote the approver. You've got to help this team. So the best way to do it is by asking good, courageous questions instead of telling, you know, and keeping in mind that you too don't know what you don't know. And you're not the smartest person in the room, and convergence needs to happen around the information, and convergence needs to be done in a nice, polite way that the team on the other side doesn't feel, significant loss of credibility in the organization if they raise their hand and say, "Hey, look, this isn't going to work." So it's getting that mindset in throughout the entire process so that courageous leadership will happen. And then if you're on the reviewing side, celebrate it and reward it because they saved you a lot of money. I could look at in industries that we're involved in advanced material industries. When you look through a gated process, there's a period of time when you're developing something where you're going to go through a gate, which I'll call the money gate. And that is, if we agree to go past this path, we're going to spend anywhere from 2 to 5 million in internal dollars looking at something, or just certifying to sell, or all the different testing. And that's not the cost of the some fixed costs of your resources. This is variable cost. So you start looking at it and going, okay, now that I've gone through the money gate, I've put 2, 3, $4 million at risk here and committed towards this. Let's reward someone if they don't spend it. Yeah,
If
because
they
they
don't
saw a
spend it.
flaw
Yeah.
before the spend was going to happen. Let's reward people. And it's the same thing as we'll flip here and talk about M&A for a second. The minute that you sign up and say, "Hey, I want to look at this acquisition," and in M&A world, we issue an indication of interest, or an IOI. I'm interested in buying your business for about X to Y. We'll get, and this other side says, that sounds intriguing. Let's move forward. Right at that time, you could easily be putting $1 million towards that project in external accounting, legal, and all that advice. So realize just, and this is the powerful thing, and that we do and help a lot of companies get around, is there's a gated process to M&A, there's a gated process to organic, and then how do you manage all your capital around how you're going to grow the business? And that's on the organic innovation side, of gated process. And then it also costs a lot of money in marketing programs and all that to really look at strategically placing your business and share gain and all that sort of stuff. So this is where we'll come forward with a holistic diagnostic on how do you grow the business, and what is the science behind it, what are your options, and more so, how are you going to direct your capital to try and get the return that you're expecting in the growth outlook that you want.
Yeah. No, that's 100% true. Yeah, that's all. That makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Well, I always say there's a science behind growth, and if you're passionate about it, you can have a lot of fun doing this.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely definitely could be fun. It definitely could be stressful. What I'm hearing though is like what's interesting is the complexity of all these different things, right? Because you have to have a leader that has an open mind and, doesn't know all the answers and knows that he doesn't know the answers, because a lot of leadership can be one where it's about control and egotism and power and everything. And so that's just one of the things we're talking. That's just the leadership piece. We talked about innovation, growth. We talked about all these different things. So it's interesting because all these add another layer of complexity towards this growth challenge, especially
You're
in
you're
innovative
exactly right, and
and organic.
the way to win is to learn how to influence and lead without the need for authority. And when you can do that, you can really win the hearts and minds of people around you. And because nobody likes to be told what to do. At the same time, too, I don't know that I've really run into a room where someone is so smart that they know everything. Yeah. And unfortunately, those that think they do don't, and they become a detriment. I guess, they truly become a detriment. There's kind of interesting thing of when you talk about leadership and leading. A great industrial psychologist taught me this, and it's probably about true. You look at the population of people in the workforce, and then you ask the question, who's strategic? And nobody wants to say they're not. But when you really look at the population, it really breaks down to a third, a third, a third. A third of the folks will say, I'm not strategic. I'm very tactically minded. Let me stay to the tactics. I'll do a great job for you. Then there's truly only a third of the population that are strategic. And the middle is the part of the population that thinks they're strategic. They're not. They don't have a strategic bone. And in fact, the minute you put them in a strategic type atmosphere, they screw it all up. So that's what you gotta watch out for when you're leading here, is know your strengths, work to your strengths, and be
Yeah.
careful. If you're not strategic, don't stay saying, I'm the most strategic mind here, and then you're the most tactical person. It's a mismatch.
Yeah, no, that's actually a great point, and I think that is a good point to lead this conversation right there. I think that that is a high point of this conversation. I always talk about personality types. I always talking about like, those type of things. And yeah, I like seeing that in leadership, and I like seeing that personality. And like you're saying, there's particular people that are more tactical, which and they confuse it for strategic. So yeah, I think that is huge actually. And I mean, we're throwing a lot at them in this episode. So I think that I think this be good for today in terms of the episode. Is there any if
Plus,
people wanted to think like you want to say something?
no, I was going to say, let's leave it on one point. There's a science behind how you grow things. And it's great to know the science, but the science only comes to life through people. Yeah. And this is where you've really got to kind of figure out the talent match to the processes,
Mm.
and the systems, etc. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's another aspect of it, right? I mean, in terms of, the like there's also the personality fit that needs to be in there because it's not only, the because other people can create systems, right? So that's a cool thing. Not everybody can write the systems you do because you have a unique process and because who you are. I mean, and that whole aspect of things, right? It's like yeah. That's
But we're still
that
doing business through people. As much as
yeah,
we utilize AI for a lot of information and that, we're still doing business through people. So we got to figure
yeah.
out the connections of people.
100%, 100%. And it's about working with those people because sometimes there's a personality conflict. And if one person is super conservative and doesn't want to make any kind of changes, and then they try to bring in some innovation, it's almost like, why'd you hire me? It's like you're setting yourself up for failure. Do you not know who you are? Do you not know yourself? That you're gonna be, maybe at least put someone else in that place that is more open-minded, have the understanding of your own personality to say, okay, I want to do this initiative, but I know I'm not the right person, right? And I need to put someone else in place because I'm going to mess this whole thing up if I try to touch it, right? There's that whole angle too, but totally, yeah. I mean, I think this is a great episode. I appreciate you for coming on. If people want to find more about you, Robert, and they want to learn more about what you do, how would they do that?
Best way to connect with me is through the ChemQuest group. Like I said, I've recently taken over as president and CEO of the ChemQuest group. So it's first initial last name at chemquest.com, or look us up on the internet, or look me up through LinkedIn and you can see the different activities I've been involved in through my career. But love to get and love to share the knowledge. I guess that's it, for the benefit of people trying to grow their businesses or grow their career.
Yeah, I'm totally into that. Well, thank you so much for your time here, Robert. This is the Growth Mindset Podcast signing off.